Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, December 12th. Let's hop in. I should have probably played some of that cup, festival cup thing that's happening for Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the weekend and just made progress even on the daily quest. And you know what? I didn't do any of that, and I didn't even do a Duel live. I don't even know if I got the daily logins. But I did finish Killer 7, and wow, can I not really recommend Killer 7 to your average person. I will say the big caveat there. If you want to see what Suda 51 and Grasshopper manufacture, and I honestly think it's probably more Grasshopper manufacturer than even Suda 51. I think Suda 51 sells himself like he's a Kojima, but really I think a lot of the development and production of Killer 7 very possibly was only half influenced by Suda 51 as an executive producer, because there was definitely other writers and other teams. And looking at the credits of Killer 7, it's really just a hodgepodge of 4 or 5 different companies all working together, plus NIS America making the Windows version port, and Capcom being the publisher and owner of Killer 7 and basically doing nothing with it. And I don't know what you really could do with it, because the story is just not good. Like, I had always had the feeling, by not being spoiled on it, that it was kind of this niche favorite game, and it probably is, but I think that niche fandom is probably a lot smaller than even I thought it was. Inherently too, there's a problem personally with me playing Killer 7 in 2022, whereas if I had played it when it first came out on the GameCube, and if it had come out like before Resident Evil 4, the competition would have just been significantly lower, and when it came out for the PS2. So it's just a really old game. I had thought I had seen at some point that, and this is a spoiler for something that doesn't happen, so it's still a spoiler, one of the major characters who's in a wheelchair, I swear I thought I had seen a cutscene where at some point he stands out of that wheelchair and it reveals that he could walk the whole time. That twist, which doesn't happen, wouldn't have really even changed the story much. The big twist at the end is something that's kind of fairly obvious from the beginning, just in the fact that you have this Smith syndicate of 7 different personalities that swap bodies when you change to that different personality, and different types of weapons and different types of guns. The big reveal there, or at least half of the big reveal there, not that interesting. There is a secondary reveal that there's no way you would have possibly even guessed was coming, because there's no foundation left set up for it until the last level of the game. Although there is some slight teasing of a foreshadowing, I guess is what you might say. But the overall game is just not well designed as far as the gameplay mechanic. Nearly every single boss fight turns into more of a puzzle boss fight. It feels like it really should have been an on-the-rails shooter. It feels like the story is just insane. Half of the story is a Japanese team trying to tell a political story around the United States electoral process, and it reveals basically nothing, and at the end goes, what do we know about US politics? We're Japanese, is literally what they say. So it's just like this dumb red herring. And so there's just not a lot to really like, which is crazy, because I kind of thought I would like it a lot more, and I'd hoped I would like it a lot more. it is kind of in that mushy middle uh, as far as the reception there. It's not like I passionately hated it, but I also didn't passionately love it. And yeah, I thought I had saw that there was like a mini-series anime, a limited series anime around Killer 7, but I could not find it online. There is an anime that was called Killer 7 originally, and then it was changed to like Scissors 7, which is a terrible name. And I remember seeing that come out on Netflix many years later. So I wonder if that was a miscommunication. There was a comic book series around Killer 7, but that's about it. A major problem with the game is that there's just not any backstories for these 7 characters. So you have in the title this number 7 killers. Obviously what you would want is some revelations and some backstories around those 7 killers to show them to be actually interesting characters that you might want to know more about, characters that you'd care about, and it just doesn't happen. On a gameplay mechanic, there's a point at the very end where you are going to straight up lose if you don't remember that you have to press the B button to lock on enemies, but usually you had to scan enemies with the left trigger first before you press the B button, and the scan doesn't work. So it just very much at the very end of the game changes how it plays, and there's kind of a lot of that where there are gameplay mechanics that don't quite play well. There's a whole RPG element in which you can level up characters, but there's no new game plus, and there's really not enough currency to even level up more than one character to the max level. Plus, leveling up one character to the max level does not really help. It just stops having the kind of benefit you would expect. So what it boils down to is you want to level up one character to like level 3 or level 4, and then that's about it. The game forces you in specific situations to play as different characters, so you can never just level up one character and play as them. And all of that would have been fine if there was just a new game plus element to it where you could play the game a second time and try for higher scores and a faster experience. But the game is incredibly slow too. Like, there's way more puzzles than what you would have thought. You would have thought it would have been just an on-the-rails shooter like House of the Dead, maybe with some branching paths. There's really not any branching paths worth mentioning. The whole level design sometimes lets you go in different directions or go back if you miss something, but if you play the game even decently well, you will have collected everything on your first pass from the beginning to the end, and you'll be done. There's 2 points in the game where you have to basically have a walkthrough in front of you, because it's going to ask you to type in answers into a terminal. So that's just another thing that's wasting your time. There is, I don't know if I mentioned it before, kind of a weird disabled elderly abuse section, and apparently this caused some controversy back in the day that moved Killer 7 from being rated mature to adults only. And so there's like a off-screen implication of some of that, or on-screen implication of a disabled person being slapped, and that doesn't really go anywhere either. It's just, maybe the Killer 7 may very well be like the best example ever of an artist having very little restrictions and very little censorship pressed on them, or any like mandates put on them at the beginning. and that probably comes down to this story that I saw about where Capcom had promised 5 games, and Killer 7 was one of the 5 games that was going to come out exclusively on the GameCube, and then immediately on stage they said, no, only Resident Evil 4 of the Capcom 5 are actually going to be exclusive to the GameCube. And then there was Resident Evil 4, Killer 7, and then Beautiful Joe, and then a couple other bad ones, one of which didn't actually come out at all. And so, yeah, I kind of wish they had gone further in the direction of saying, hey, this is part of the story and this is supposed to reveal something. I'll spoil the game by saying something somewhat that I thought was going to be the revelation isn't quite the revelation. There's this disabled old man called Harmon who's sitting in front of a TV. You always go to this TV or a TV like it to change personalities. So you would kind of assume from that there was a hint there that all the multiple personalities and everything in the game in general was just happening in the mind of the old man, and that it was all just a fantasy, and he's just had kind of like this multiple personality fantasy going on, and that the real world was he was being abused, and he was just a drooling catatonic person. And that's not really the story. I mean, you could try and explain it that way. That the story is weird enough you could try and explain it a lot of different ways, but that's just not really what happened, and it probably would have been better if that was really what was happening, because I was just basically assuming that was what was happening. At the core of it, though, if you're going to try and remake something called Killer 7, you probably should just give up completely, for the characters aren't that interesting. Once you beat the game, you unlock a new mode called Killer 8. It gives you a new character and makes the game a lot harder. And at the higher difficulty, it's basically one-hit kill always, which isn't exactly a one-hit kill, but it significantly increases the difficulty and starts you back up, where you'd have to level everything up to a high amount. I guess we should play this. But yeah, it's hard to even be passionately upset with Killer 7 because it is such just a middle of the road experience. What it really makes me miss, though, is that Carnival, which was a arcade shooter, never came to it's a shame that never really came to PC. And then there's a lot of on-the-rail shooters that really should have come to PC. Killer 7 in no way compares to Resident Evil 4, and it definitely shows a middle step, frankly, between Suda 51's first couple of games, which were just basically visual novels type games, flat 2D interfaces, and Killer 7, which goes 3D but is very rough and very low polygon. And then you have No More Heroes, and for the most part, No More Heroes succeeds very nicely in that it is a real game that people really would want to play, but it also, like, the difference between the GameCube and the Wii significantly improved No More Heroes also, in that had they not made a Wii, which had the Wiimotes that you could wiggle back and forth and use like a lightsaber, there's basically no way you would have been able to make No More Heroes, or you wouldn't want to personally make No More Heroes if you didn't have the Wiimote. And honestly, you have like Wii Bowling, Wii Sports, the original Wii Sports, and then you have No More Heroes, and there was a game called Zack and Wiki that worked very nicely with the Wiimote. And then everything else kind of is at a lower tier as far as how it benefited from the Wiimote. Resident Evil 4 being re-released on the Wiimote made it very easy to play, but that doesn't inherently mean it was the best version of the game or anything. It was just an easier version of the game. A lot of other games, medium-wise, used the Wiimotes, but a lot of them didn't come off better because of the Wiimote. Inherently, if you think of the Wiimote as the in-home equivalent of a light gun game, then you have to kind of admit that in most arcades, if there's, say, 100 arcade machines in an arcade, let's just pick a nice round number like 100, there probably was only 3 light gun games in general. Everything else would have been buttons and a joystick or some other gimmick controls. Yeah, I'd say probably 95 of 100 would have been buttons and control sticks, and then you might have some ones steering wheel type racing games as far as stand-up upright arcade machines or sit-down arcade machines. That's ignoring skee-ball and some of those other carnival type arcade games, not including that in the 100. Excuse me. I also spent a ton of time drinking water because a lot of it was not voiced in actual English in Killer 7, so I was doing a lot of reading. I think more and more that is going to be just a thing where I'm just going to be downing water like crazy. That may also just be because it's winter and I'm running a heater and that's drying my throat out. So yeah, I would say the Wiimote probably worked for about 3% of all the games released on it, and then they got around the problem for most other games, but I don't think Mario Galaxy actually is a better game with the Wiimote. Had the Mario Galaxy come out on the GameCube and been played on the GameCube with controllers from the GameCube. And I know the GameCube was... The Wii was backward compatible to GameCube games, and you could plug GameCube controllers into it, but I don't know if all Wii games actually supported GameCube controllers. It very well may have, and I just don't remember. I was very much in the hype of the Wii when the Wii was out, so it takes many years of looking back to say, oh yeah, the Wii was very much a gimmick, and over its lifetime really struggled. Where you compare that to something like, let's just say, the Xbox One, not the Xbox One X or the Xbox Series X or Series X, but the Xbox One, the one there was kind of the middle step after the Xbox 360. That console, in comparison, didn't change the controllers really, didn't really do much other than offer slightly improved hardware, and it is not talked about now in history because it wasn't innovative, but it probably served the audience a lot better because there was backward compatibility for all the massive catalog of Xbox 360 games, and that backward compatibility still exists now. In fact, the Xbox Series S, which is the disc drive missing version of the Xbox Series, is apparently going to be selling for $50, which makes me assume that Microsoft has made the commitment to abandon the requirement of supporting the Xbox Series S particularly, and that they are just trying to get rid of that hardware. Now, that requirement may be abandoned at the end of next year, and certainly with the part shortage and everything, it kind of would make sense to limit yourself to the Xbox Series X alone in hardware, even though that is a really expensive console. I don't know if there isn't a bunch of saturation of still Xbox 360s spinning around and Xbox Ones spinning around. There is perhaps not the best argument to buy anything if you have a 360 right now, anything higher. Like, getting an Xbox One doesn't quite make sense. Getting a Series S doesn't quite make sense, because if you have a bunch of discs from the 360, or if you can get used discs from the 360, you still kind of have to put the discs in to verify it, unless they're straight up just going to let you add a potentially rented disc game into your catalog and not verify whether you still own the disc. And you'll do particularly well if you bought the Xbox 360 around the time it launched and you haven't bought a console since now, and if you bought the Xbox Series X. Although what the Series X often is offering is just things that people don't care about as much, as far as how many people really do have 2K TVs that they're playing video games on, or 4K TVs, or anything like that. So yeah, do I have anything else to say about Killer 7? There's another game called Killer is Dead, which people thought was going to be a sequel to Killer 7, and is also, I think, made by Grasshopper Manufacturer, but doesn't seem like Suda51 is actually involved in that. So I think at this point I was thinking I was following the series of games made by Suda51, but actually I think I'm probably more following just Grasshopper Manufacturer as a company. Perhaps I should always follow companies and not individuals who claim way more credit than they probably deserve when as producers. But I don't think I'm going to cover Killer's Dead. Killer 7 went really long, and I want to play No More Heroes now, and so the series is going very long. And who knows if that's going to help or hurt my channel, or just the amount of footage I'm making. I still definitely don't feel like I'm anywhere where I used to be as far as making footage. I did over the weekend schedule a bunch of YouTube shorts for one of the time slots, which put me very high, and now I need to schedule a big chunk at the end of this week or next week or the week after that of YouTube shorts in the other time slot. And what's funny there is I had a title that said check out this Steam game with an emoji icon, and then I had a title that said daily Steam game, and it felt like when I introduced the check out the Steam game title, that was working way better, and that was the one to go with for both slots. I've now been looking at the analytics, which I really haven't looked at lately, and it turns out that the daily Steam game is succeeding fairly well, and frankly, it is just a mix of, like, some people like one title and some people like the other title. So I have no idea which title is better, and honestly it kind of just seems like I should use both titles and probably think up a third title and release a third YouTube short, because I am getting massive amounts of extra views. I got like 23 new subscribers. I see Charla Esmeralda is on the chat saying hello, so I'll say hello back. So yeah, and today specifically, I have like one short that's like rapidly getting over 100 views, which, I mean, that is just massive amounts of views from my channel. Not for any successful YouTuber, certainly, but the YouTube shorts have this factor in which they are up to a minute long, so I'm averaging about 20 seconds on them on a lot of videos, which means I'm getting like 25% retention, which is a way better ratio, which seems to be what the algorithm is looking at, than long live streams that are 3 hours long or hour long pre-recorded footage of games. Not that I can really affect that, because I'm not going to try and break up long plays of games from the beginning to the end into minute long chunks. No way, that would be ridiculous. It would be a ton of overhead, and nobody would really want to see that. Charla Esmeralda says, "You doing viewers only, Ola?" No. I got mush mouth there. You dueling viewers also? Built a deck I want to test out. No, I'm not dueling viewers at the moment on Master Duel, because of the way Master Duel just disincentivizes players from doing that. Like, I have a whole bunch of daily quests that you can't really get done, particularly right now in this championship, which is where everybody should be playing, is this Duel Cup championship. And you can only get those daily quests by doing the Duel Cup. And then there's also ranked play, and you want to get up in ranked play. So yeah, it's just not worth the time. Plus, it's a giant hassle to try to even duel fans. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel really needs to work on that. As a consolation, I will say also, if you have a deck you want to test out, you're not going to get a lot of knowledge or information from playing me. I play Yu-Gi-Oh! Very passively. I kind of don't know what I'm doing. I don't pay attention to it. It really is just background for video game news. So, sorry. You can friend me if you want. See if we can bring up the friend code here. No, you can't do it that way. Nope, can't even do it this way. Well, I'll show it after this game, but I'm trying to build up, I guess, a list of friends on Yu-Gi-Oh! So at some point, if it is worthwhile playing people, then I'll play people, but I'm just not doing it now. Alright. Charlie says, I have a couple of cards away from completing this Sun God deck with Numerian support. See, and this is how you know you won't get any real knowledge if you play me, because I have no idea what that means. Like, True Sun God deck with Numerian support. I'd have to go look up those cards. I think I vaguely have heard of that deck and probably played it in the previous Yu-Gi-Oh game. But like this deck here, Flowandries, is a deck that I just went to a website and built, and as best as I could, and I spent pretty much all of my crafting points to make it, and I don't even really like it, but it does seem to scare away a lot of people because it looks like a top tier meta deck, even though it really isn't quite that top tier meta deck. So I get a lot of people that are occasionally just surrender as soon as they see it. But I kind of have a real distaste for this deck because you really don't special summon anything at all, and they've added daily quests. They've added quests to special summon, fusion summon, link summon, XYZ summon, and none of those quests will be accomplished by playing this deck. Charlie says the True Sun God with Numerian support is basically Winged Dragon of Ra, 1 turn kill. Okay, so now I know, until I forget again. Let's see. Well, did I have anything else I wanted to talk about? I suppose I didn't win a Steam Deck. I never got any kind of email or anything from Steam, nor did I see anybody talk about how terrible the chat was on the Game Awards. Generally, all enthusiasm for the Game Awards disappeared as soon as the Steam Game Awards were done. See if maybe I can do something here. Yeah, I guess I could send 2 back into the hopes of drawing something new. Look at that. That might work. Well, putting those 2 in defense mode was a mistake in that case, but whatever. I may have eliminated this guy's options enough that I can win here. Yeah. And yeah, I will say, because I had so many YouTube shorts and because I was able to basically make 3 different programs that would interact with each other to automate making YouTube shorts even better, that took up a lot of the weekend time where I was just sitting around and I couldn't use my computer because it was just running the macros, running the programs, which that's a weird situation. So I mean, I probably shouldn't have had what was basically about 3 months of YouTube Shorts backlogged. But yeah, that is working fairly well. It did, however, lead to me trying to still get past the age gate on Steam with custom CSS or some other way. Well, basically on OBS, when you have a web page source, you can change the custom style sheet, the CSS. And there may be a way, but there may not be a way to get past the check this box to tell us your age to see a lot of the games like the Callisto Protocol in particular, where you go to that page in an OBS browser and it just immediately tries to check your age, and I need that to be automated to record that, or I need to make separate videos. So it is mostly, I would say, ESRB rated games like the Callisto Protocol that are rated mature, that have an age gate. Most non ESRB rated games don't bother to have an age gate, and generally most games in general just don't have a an age gate at all on Steam. So I spent several hours trying to figure out if I could figure out any custom CSS for that, or to create a cookie using custom CSS or something like that, and it's just too specific of a problem, and I couldn't find any solutions that would really work. So I still have that problem, but otherwise my automated system to make YouTube Shorts works very well. My like, share, and subscribe on pre-recorded videos is random in a weird way. The way it's being triggered is random, and I need to figure out a way to make it trigger more consistently on every video. But yeah, this will basically be the last month, I imagine. Well, I'll see a massive amount of subscribers. I got like 23 subscribers. Now, I still need like 500. It's ridiculous how many subscribers you need to even get to 1,000 to potentially be in the YouTube Partner Program. Like, they went from needing 100 subscribers to 1,000 subscribers, and I'm somewhere at 500. And while I'm very grateful to get 23 at that rate, you're talking 4 months times 5, 20 months, 2 years potentially before I, at that rate, would get to 1,000. And by the point of 2 years, YouTube will probably just move the goalpost again, and then want you to have 2,000 subscribers. Yeah. And I have to assume the 23 subscribers that I got this month, most of them are people subscribing because of YouTube Shorts specifically. But starting next month, I more than likely will have the prompts to like, share, and subscribe popping up. And so that'll be where I start to test to see if having that pop up on the screen significantly increases subscribers, which I hope it does. And in a lot of ways, being a YouTube content creator, you just have to live in hope. Like, you have to just be a hopeful person, otherwise you'll do the probably intelligent thing for most people and give up. See, do I have anything else for the accountability section? It's been 40 minutes. We could probably just jump into the news. With it being the 12th of December, we are definitely at the level where everything is going to wrap up. I have noticed that it does seem like a lot of stores didn't get enough sales or just are really desperate this year. So I've seen more Slick Deal sales this year in late December than I ever have seen in my history of watching it for many years. And I've seen things weirdly go on sale that you just generally would not see on sale at all. For instance, an electric adjustable bed frame was a Slick Deal sale I saw. Those practically never go on sale at all. There we go. We've made it to Duelist level 10. Got 300 gems for that. So if I just can be fairly consistent here and get to level 20, that would be great. Twitter is still existing. It does seem like Elon Musk is leaning more into being Elon Musk on Twitter. So if there was any thought that he would possibly become more professional or be on a leash of any sense on Twitter, that doesn't seem like that's the case. Although generally, if you're just not following Elon Musk on Twitter, everything seems to be mostly the same. So that's really where I am at as far as Twitter. It still seems like it is the place to be to get video game news. Not really a place to interact with real people, but like if I was to completely abandon Twitter, I would be breaking it up to some other service for video game news, or just going directly to a couple video game sites for their news. And then the only other people that I follow are just kind of a random assortment of people, like a couple of comic book creators, some lewd cosplayers, which and then that's pretty much it. So like mostly what I would lose would be following like Gearbox giving away shift codes for Borderlands and Tiny Tina Wonderlands games, and following just generic video game companies to see what they're saying instead of waiting for a news aggregator to report on what they're saying and being a middleman. And see, that's where Twitter really doesn't have a replacement, because it doesn't make sense that you would make something like a Mastodon server that would be a collection of video game companies that often say things I don't even care to hear, but I should probably follow as trying to be at least a second tier video game journalist, not doing any real research and just re-reporting on things. But I'd like to have more sources than having everything filtered through sites like Video Games Chronicles only. Speaking of news, The Witcher 3 Next Gen Update full patch notes are on videogameschronicle.com. And yeah, seems like these are kind of abridged, concise patch notes. Usually when you get patch notes, there's either very little that has been changed and it's too short of notes, or it's too much has changed and it's just not detailed, or it's a really, really long detailed list. So that's kind of in the middle. PC next generation upgrades. There is definitely a danger, certainly, around there's a danger, I think, around the idea of playing Witcher 3 with some modifications made to it because it's been up-resed, and then losing some potential nostalgia you might have had playing The Witcher 3 the first time. That being said, that is something that most people haven't run into any real issues with. Like, particularly for The Witcher 3, you're talking a game that probably is 6-7 years old. It's not even 10 years old, I would assume. And so the slight up-res to make things look better for almost every player will will just make the game feel like the way people nostalgically remember it. That is exactly what happened to me when I played the fan-made HD mod for Resident Evil 4, is that all of the textures basically had been changed, but darn it, that was the wrong one to play. Like, all of the textures had been up-resed and changed in the fan-made mod, or almost all the textures, but the game itself felt exactly like what I vaguely remembered Resident Evil 4 felt like and looked like. So a little bit more grass in an area of Witcher 3 probably will go unnoticed by most players, but subconsciously feel a lot better. Whereas if I was going to have them fully remaster Witcher 3, which now is not the time to do that, I would probably make the landmass a little bit smaller, even though that was a selling point of The Witcher 3, that they had these giant land masses. A lot of the landmass was a little too big to accommodate the horse. Maybe get rid of the horse mechanic, because that never really works. And have more variety and more enemies in general when you are wandering the fields. Like The Witcher 3 in particular really just didn't have a lot of random ambushes or random attacks of monsters. It was very much, you had a submission and you ran to that submission, and as part of running to that submission, maybe there will be somebody being attacked on the side of the road that you could save, but that seemed very scripted and put there as part of that submission, not just as a random occurrence. Continuing with the news, Modern Warfare 2 trailer reveals its first raid ahead of next week's release, according to Video Games Chronicles. Every time now I see anything from Modern Warfare 2, it feels like I'm just repeating the same news story, because there's just so many Modern Warfare articles, particularly from Video Games Chronicles, because it's good clickbait. And I still really am not in a position where I'm hearing the voices of actual gamers that much. And that's still something that is hard to figure, but it does seem to me like there's some deafening silence around Modern Warfare 2 as far as gamers talking about it. But then you get articles like this that says Modern Warfare 2 overtakes Elden Ring as 2022's best-selling game in the US. It held off God of War Ragnarok and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to top the November sales charts. So people are playing the game. People are just not talking about playing the game, I guess. Or I'm just not hearing people talk about playing the game. And that very possibly is because I have self-selected an audience that doesn't tend to talk about the Modern Warfare series. And at a certain level, that is what the gaming community is too. It's not a bunch of people that go to Twitter or Reset Era or any other site, any other forum, Reddit, and talk about video games. There's a little bit of that, but somebody that's passionately on r/video games or whatever one actually lets you post any content, which is probably not r/video games. Like, those people are a extreme fandom of gamers. They're not really representative selection of what your average gamer is, which is somebody that just barely has enough time because they're going to work or school to play video games, and so they select all of their free time to just play video games. I kind of wish we could get straight up better numbers, and there probably is something on Steam that I could use SteamDB or something for, to just get a general daily indication of how many people are playing which game. And yeah, that's that's an intriguing idea I should probably do, is I should see if I can find a list that just gives me the daily numbers. And then since I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I could look at that list and say, yes, this is obviously a good sample or good data point of who is actually playing games. It doesn't get me deep into the weeds as far as people are bothering to review games on Steam, which is kind of my best source for gamers' opinions. Let's see, we're gonna run out of cards, or run out of room if we're not careful. Let's see. You know what? I guess I do want to do this. Do this. Let's see. We stick this here, we stick this here, we destroy this. Just get rid of that. Return that to the hand. Activate that. Send one of these back, I guess. And send that back. This is another great example of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just getting really long. Like, even when you're winning, it just becomes an exhausting experience of too much. Let's see. Let's go and destroy this. Yeah, I think I'm already feeling a little tired, so it's probably gonna be the last game for today. I really am getting down to the point where I'm doing like 45 minutes to an hour of Yu-Gi-Oh! At the beginning, and that's about as much as I can take. Let's see. Xbox apparently addressed a lack of Game Awards reveals. Quote, "We have a lot playing the show. The platform holder moves to assure fans after a surprisingly low-key showing at the annual event." Inherently, I think if I'm gonna expand my tinfoil hat conspiracy, that PlayStation really had no interest in being involved in the Game Awards at all, and that's why, even though there were several PlayStation nominated games and winners that came out, there seemed to be nobody actually from Sony Interactive Entertainment, Sony of California, in the room. If Microsoft got that word, I could see they could hold back. Also, Microsoft has Xbox Live, or id Xbox, what is it called? I can't even remember. Microsoft has its own things, and Nintendo has its own Nintendo Direct things. So, the Game Awards is kind of third-party announcements only. And you still had plenty of announcements in general of games. I did hear criticism that this year's Game Awards really wasn't any shorter than last year's. So, whatever they were saying about it being shorter, I think it's probably a little inaccurate. There's still very much a weirdness around. I think most people just want to see trailers. They just want to see commercials for 30 minutes to an hour straight. They don't particularly care about people winning the awards. The awards speeches are probably the time to go to take a bathroom break. Same is true with the musical sections. The musical sections are probably the time that people in the audience take a bathroom break, where the speeches are the time that people watching online are taking a bathroom break. But yeah, it is weird to pretend like it's an award ceremony at all. It really should just pivot to, this is the fall announcement directs. But yeah, I don't hate the idea of them giving out awards to themselves. It is basically just the industry giving themselves a pat on the back. Same is true for the Emmys and the Oscars. You also have the situation where Microsoft may just not want to announce anything until they get the Activision Blizzard acquisition done. And frankly, I don't know if they really have that much new to announce compared to things that have just already been announced and that actually have to come out. Like Bethesda has Starfield, and they need to still work on the next Elder Scrolls Skyrim game, and that's probably potentially 10 years away still. Just always going to be 10 years away. Double Fine is got to be secretly in the beginnings of working on something after releasing Psychonauts 2, and every other company that Microsoft has already acquired has to be secretly working on something and just nowhere close to being released. Perfect Dark remake is supposed to come out at some point. Let's see. Let's go ahead and get rid of that and that. I'm just activating everything. I really wish you could just say, go ahead and activate everything automatically. Just gonna set this card. And I guess that leaves me with doing this. Then just go ahead and activate this. See if this kills it this time. Can I activate my card ability now? I'm just trying to discard cards. Yeah, discard this one, and then discard this one. part of the problem certainly is that anything Microsoft announces or anybody announces at the Game Awards is just something that's going to eat the lunch of the last few sales before the end of the year, because no announcement now is going to lead to a game actually coming out now, and they don't really have any new hardware to sell now on the promise of new games in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a mid-tier upgrade to the Xbox Series S that is a better version and has some kind of ridiculous name around it also. And that better version of the Series S will probably have the exact same GPU and RAM as the Series X, and the only difference at that point will just be the fact that it doesn't have a disk drive. And they're probably going to try and rush that out somewhere around halfway through 2023 and sell that hardware. Even if they did sell hardware like that, though, announcements for new games at the end of the year probably would only minimally increase the sales of that hardware. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle also says Phil Spencer claims that PlayStation wants to grow the market, wants to grow by, quote, making Xbox smaller. The execs continued war of words over Microsoft Activision's Blizzard's acquisition. It's really not so much a war of words. It's not like Phil Spencer, or I think Jim Ryan is the name of the guy at Sony, are coming on the Twitter and actively just saying things out of the blue. It's actually very rare that is the way things go down. What's happening is these people are taking interviews, and in taking interviews they know they're going to be asked certain questions, so like it's not really a major surprise that they're being asked these questions and that they have a pre-written response or thought out responses. It is perhaps a exaggeration, though. Like the idea of saying that he wants like the exact quote here, and it's frankly always important to use and see the exact quotes because the headline quotes are always misleading. Particularly Video Games Chronicles and GameDeveloper.com are two of my sources that really like to editorialize or change the meaning in the headline. So the exact quote here is, quote, Sony is trying to protect its dominance on the console, which is admitting dominance on the console, which I guess Xbox is willing to do, or Phil Spencer is willing to do, period. They want to grow. The way they grow is by making Xbox smaller. Well, this acquisition, if it doesn't go through, does not in any way make Xbox smaller. It keeps Xbox at the same. So that is inherently inaccurate description of what really would happen if the merger didn't go through. That being said, had you added the word relatively smaller, that would have been a more accurate statement, because it's not like Sony hasn't acquired people and acquired things. Alright, we should be able to win here. This is just super long, these games. Yeah. And that's another thing why I don't like this Four Laundries deck, is it just takes way too long, even if it is a slower, more guaranteed victory. That tends to be the case for most meta decks, though, is that if you want that slower, higher chance of winning, you tend to have to to take it a little bit slower and not go for one-turn kill gimmicks unless you can just guarantee a one-turn kill gimmick. And if you can't guarantee a one-turn kill gimmick, then usually the game is so broken it's not worth playing anymore, whatever the card game is. So as far as the Duelist Cup, spells and traps, we made a bit of progress there. Normal summoning, we still would need to do a lot more normal summoning, which is weird because we've done a ton. Win the Duelist Cup, we still would have to win a lot more. Duel in the Duelist Cup, we'd have to do a lot more of that. As far as daily quests, activating trap cards, there's just like no trap cards at all. And then ritual summoning and all of this. And then we've also done one of the secret ones. So one more secret one is now done forever, which is slowly eliminating all of the last few lifetime quests that would give us opportunities to get gold. Yeah, and again, I probably need to play offline, and I probably need to duel just in ranked with my other deck. Which doesn't work, so I probably should just do a casual match with the Zodiac Tri-Brigade. Yeah, and I said that was going to be our last game, but I'm going to try and do one casual match. Let's see. Here's an interesting story from Video Games Chronicles. Goat Simulator 3 developers are telling players to run the Epic Games launcher through Steam for controller support. The game is exclusive to the Steam store. I mean, to the Epic Games store. Which, that is definitely a slap in the face to a lot of people there. I mean, that is just a Rick James Chappelle show. Let's just slap everybody in the room and run in a circle type slap. First of all, Epic Games Store does not like a headline that says your Epic Games Storefront is broken enough or just doesn't have controller support enough for this game to be launched and run directly from your storefront. Steam doesn't like the idea of a game that is exclusive to a competitor, although I don't think Steam really cares about the Epic Store competition that much, because it really isn't that much competition. But inherently, Steam is not going to be happy about their controller support just being used that way, because Valve and Steam have worked very hard to get controller support to work well in their software, in the Steam client. So yeah, neither Epic Games Store or Steam come off good or happy with that announcement. And then in general, the game players themselves are getting shafted here, with Goat Simulator's developers basically saying, we don't even care about you enough to give you a proper solution. We're just going to tell you this jerry-rig solution. Now, I'm going to throw this out without doing any research. And say, I think the developers of Goat Simulator 3 may not be the same developers of Goat Simulator 1 or 2. And that the company may have gotten bought out, and that this may be, if I was just to guess, some random company, possibly a Chinese company, just trying to release a third game. but I could be totally wrong about that. I'm just going to throw that out with no research. This is baseless speculation. The point here, also to point out, is it seems like this is an automated bot that has on Discord that is answering that questions. Inherently, the automated bot could be updated to say something completely different, and that this isn't really supposed to be the official solution that they would release with. The Epic Games Store and its exclusivity still really hasn't felt like it helped Epic in large numbers, and it doesn't feel like it's really hurt Steam in large numbers. It's just created yet another storefront that I don't think that many people use, and yet I do go and get their free games just as a backup. The best thing the Epic Games Store has done is given a nice place where you could get a decent collection of free games every month, to, in case you're just completely broke as a PC gamer. I don't know how many PC gamers can afford a gaming PC for $700 to $3,000 and then can't afford games, but there might be a couple of people like that spend all the money on the hardware and then are just getting the games for free one way or the other. So it's kind of nice to have that backup just in case Steam ever disappeared, but if Steam ever did disappear, you would just see massive amounts of people pirating games left and right, unless there was some major accommodation otherwise. But yeah, the competition hasn't really done great for Epic in particular, and they haven't done a great job of making a new storefront. Arguably, if they had launched the Epic Games Store, say today, instead of a couple years ago, and then he had polished everything out and made the storefront really work, and just be feature complete and in parallel with what all the features Steam offers. If they'd come out running that way, that very possibly would have been something more people would have jumped on board with. But there's still massive amounts of features that are just not available in the Epic Games Store. Meanwhile, what people aren't talking about instead, because of the Epic Games Store eating Epic as a company's bandwidth as far as their press releases they can put out, is nobody's talking about the Unreal Engine version 5.1, which adds a fairly large amount of new features and more surfaces and textures supporting ray tracing, and just makes the game generally look a lot better, in that they put the newest version, or I think it's the newest beta version of the 5.1 in Fortnite, and Fortnite now looks fairly better because of the new Unreal Engine version. Geez, getting all these victories is great and all, but am I actually doing anything by getting these victories in casual? I've never played casual mode before, since it's relatively a new addition to Yu-Gi-Oh! This may be that I just play too well for people playing casual, and we may just have people conceding like crazy. I really wish the Epic company maybe got a different CEO. Like, honestly, a lot of companies, if you just had like somebody who is a little bit more cautious and slow in what they do and didn't just try to push out crazy ideas, a lot of these .com type CEOs, if they were just replaced with good old-fashioned Target CEOs, Walmart CEOs, people that just keep the trains running on time and make profit. Now, arguably, Walmart, as far as their Walmart Plus online service, was slow to adapt compared to Amazon.com, but if there's probably a happy middle between them being that slow and Facebook and Meta trying to potentially create the metaverse, and Elon Musk trying to create automatic driving cars, and Apple trying to convince you they're changing the world back when Steve Jobs was in charge and alive. See, this is exactly what I needed to do. I needed to summon a bunch of these XYZ things to get the daily quest done. I need to activate a trap, activate this, add that to a hand, activate this. But yeah, I start to play something like this Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck, which I enjoy playing a lot more, and because you don't have that element of ranked play in it, people are just quitting. So basically, as far as this daily, which I have too many daily quests and I need to get these done, I need to play ranked, and I guess I'll just have to do it off screen. Because I just XYZ'd summoned. I'm fairly certain those were XYZ summons I just did, and yet that didn't count when playing casual. Let's see, do we have any important notes here? Yeah, here it says missions that do not specify any duel mode can be completed both in ranked and event duels. It does not include, and that may just be a case that they haven't updated that instructions, but it right now does not seem to include team battles, duel rooms, or casual mode. So anything under this free duel. And that does seem to be true. Let's see. We want to wait, I think, until we have 10 packs of this. If we can get 10 packs of this, as far as the Duels come, to open these cards. We can get a general idea of just what cards are available. It really isn't that much that you could even get. Just getting potentially 2 or 3 copies of ultra rares and super rares, which would be nice, but yeah, this is a very small selection of cards. I imagine they just want a lot of people to have, and this is an interesting image, but I don't know if that image actually helps you in any way. Draw of Fate. I guess that's just card art that they're cycling through. And I don't know if the limited list information there helps you at all. Let's go ahead and open a couple of packs here. Just continue down the path of opening these older cards that I don't think are really playable. of the problems specifically about Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is the idea that you're getting these older cards, and there's a collection of 10,000 cards potentially that could be in this game. I think they're up to 7,000 that they have actually added to the game. And yet you have this deck limit problem where they now want you to spend the premium currency to add more decks. Whereas really there should be a library here just by default in the game of like famous decks from the anime series. Like what was Yugi's very first deck on episode 1 before anything changed. And then there should be episode like 5 changes that would have happened to Yugi's deck. I know particularly in the first series of Yu-Gi-Oh! That would be mostly made up stuff, but that'd be fairly famous ideas. And then there should be like bug decks and dark magician decks and things like that. They still also have this secret pack that is new, and it would just come down to opening this secret pack is probably not worth it anymore. Opening that one secret pack would then open up other secret packs, but at this level I think one of these selection packs I have less cards in, so yeah, it would make a lot more sense to open this. But I want to get a little bit more, maybe about 1,000 more, just to be cautious before I open any more secret packs. And we're still doing the dual pass in 45 days, and after you get to 100 nothing else happens. Yeah, I think, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. You have 25 deck slots here. I don't even know what this is. This is, I guess, one of these Duelist Cup decks, which are temporary. And so most of these you have to buy as far as decks, and you can potentially do a public deck search, but you'd have to search by card name, and it's just no way you would actually be able to find the right deck that you were looking for if you were going to go through that. These are all structured decks, I guess, that maybe I could archive in that way, so I could potentially take like this Burning Spirit structured deck and always have it here to rebuild it while deleting it here to free up one more spot. But yep, 10,000 cards though. You would think you'd have an unlimited number of decks, and you wouldn't have to pay to do more. Let's see, I'm not going to actually edit this, but I will come over here and dismantle all extra cards just to see. Yeah, I don't have a significant amount of extra cards either. And yeah, if I ever have any free time, there's still a lot of room to craft normal cards and craft rare cards with the crafting points. That I don't think this game is ever going to add significant amounts of cards in an expansion. I imagine you may get an expansion with 60 new cards, and of those 60 new cards, maybe 30 would be normal. No real reason to potentially sit on 4,000 crafting points for that while you still are trying to collect all the existing cards. Alright, but yeah, I really need to just start following the news, and only the news. We're still going through Video Games Chronicles articles. We have about 5 more. Sonic Prime's lead wants a big budget game adaptations to use more traditional voice actors. Dean Mack is the 3rd actor to portray Sonic in the last year. if he means traditional voice actors in the sense of actual voice actors instead of hiring celebrities to do the voice lines, I can agree with that to a certain level. Although, at a certain extent, I kind of would like to see the voice actors that voice the game characters in video games having more exclusivity or character right clauses or right of first refusal clauses in their contracts. If there was actual unionization, um, or better unionization in video game voice acting, you would seem that there would be some, you would hope that there was some kind of contract there that if you get hired to be the voice actor of a video game, then you should be offered to be the voice actor of the movie adaptation of the video game. But yeah, it still could very well be a situation where traditional voice actors could become the standard, but there could be high cost, high expense voice actors who are doing Sonic in Sonic movies, and then there could be cheap voice actors doing the voice acting in video games, which that doesn't quite seem fair. Of course, then you also run into the problem with any idea of that, of the Bayonetta 1 and 2 voice actress being at least a little bit dishonest. I was going to say diva, but that's sexist and unfair to call her a diva. But obviously she was a little bit dishonest and a pain to work with at some level, and so they replaced her in Bayonetta 3. Had there been some kind of union contract that said, no, you have to give her a job offer first, there could have been some trouble there that would have caused Bayonetta 3 to never be made, or to be made without voice acting, which that would have really sucked. Although in fairness, if the contract says a standard union SAG contract must be offered first to an established character voice actor, in the case of the Bayonetta 1 and 2 voice actress, she refused what seemed to be a pretty standard offer. So, yeah. So if the video game companies were under union contract to say they have to offer a standard contract to the voice actor who's already done that character first, and then that voice actor says, no, I want more money, or no, I don't want to do it, then they can offer it to anybody and the slot becomes opened up. That seems like a fair balance, or at least the beginnings of a fair balance between the individual voice actors' talent being appreciated and properly compensated for, and the company's desire to not particularly overpay for voice actors. There is, in a lot of ways, a lot of Hollywood dirty politics, for lack of a better term, that will constantly run amok for any video game being converted to movies and TVs. And inherently, as gamers, we have to say, you know, a Sonic movie is kind of a unique outlier, and Mario movies too. They're basically commercials for the video games. They should not be considered better or even on the same level as the video games themselves. And movies in general should not, at this point, be considered better or even on the same level as video games. Video games make way more profit. They're more interactive. They're longer. In almost every aspect I can think of, they are a better experience, unless you just really love going to a theater or being passive and sitting for 2 hours and watching somebody else tell you a story. The narrative is consistent in movies where you have actual interactivity in between the cutscenes of video games. So if you don't like the interactivity, I get that. But Otherwise, games should always be thought as the better thing. We don't want video games to become like the comic industry, where comic books, DC and Marvel in particular, really boned things up and screwed things up as far as their comic book universes and their comic book fandoms, and they could never gain a mainstream audience for comic books, and they really never have done a good job trying to gain a mainstream audience for comic books. And so you have this situation where comic books are just this niche thing where people put out ideas that will eventually become the Marvel and DC movies, but all the money is around Marvel and DC movies. Batman, in particular, comic books don't sell as well by any means as Batman movies or Batman video games or, frankly, Batman lunchboxes and bed sheets. And that is the worst scenario to possibly be in, to have an industry where you have the most control in the comic books to create the character, expand the character, and tell the stories you really want to see, and that fails miserably, and then everybody else is profiting off of your failed efforts way more. That's basically a rant about not much of anything. Inherently, this story, I also think, this guy, Devin Mack, or the Sonic Prime's lead, wanting big budget game adaptations to use more traditional voice actors, kind of seems like he would be the one in charge to see that happen, or it would at least seem like he's the one in charge. He probably isn't as far as a lot of those decisions, but it doesn't 100% seem like that's what is going to happen. And this would be a better story, certainly, once the Mario movie comes out and all is said and done. There was, if I'm recalling correctly, a lot of consternation around the trailers of Detective Pikachu, but when Detective Pikachu actually came out, people kind of liked it. So we might as well withhold judgment until the Mario movie comes out. And honestly, after the Mario movie comes out, we're probably in for a very long dry spell in which no other video game movies do come out, because it really is only Mario and Sonic movies that would really fall in that category of video game movies. The Uncharted movie, for instance, big flop, really, in my gamer opinion. And like Tomb Raider movies and older movies like that aren't even really in the same category. I don't think you can call a Transformers movie based on video games, since Transformers was originally a cartoon/comic. It was originally a comic. So what we're going to more than likely see is things like another Star Wars movie and another Indiana Jones movie, and then games coming out based on that, and going back more to that traditional idea of movies first, video games spin-offs second. And it pretty much seems like we would just get Mario and Sonic. I doubt we're going to get a Star Fox movie or a Metroid movie or anything like that. A lot of them are also going into TV shows that are not animated, like the Last of Us TV show. Inherently, the fact that there are so few kids games in the first place limits the number of kids movies that could possibly be made in the first place. Moving on, Nintendo confirms that Mario Strikers' next DLC is its final free update. It's unclear if paid content for the game will be added in the future. I did see Mario Strikers was on a slickdeals.net sale, which very possibly is around that idea. The main problem though with Mario Strikers still being at $35 is that may be a little too expensive for Mario Strikers, which is not really that well received if I recall correctly. Let's see. It looks like the Final Fantasy 1 through 6 pixel remasters could be coming to Switch and PlayStation 4. The 6 games are currently only available on PC and mobile, but they have now been rated for a console. The Final Fantasy pixel remasters through 1 through 6 is basically just Final Fantasy 1 through 6 with a slap of paint on it, and I don't know if there's really enough of a fandom here they would want to go back and play these really old Final Fantasy games. The Final Fantasy series is a mess. It really is. It's just a collection of random games, some of which have connections to each other, some of which don't. You can see a ton of concept art that they're trying to use to, or just advertisement art they're trying to use to get you hyped around the games, but you can see what the real games look like. They look like old NES Final Fantasy games, because that's exactly what they were. Yeah. If you have some nostalgia for this and an incredible amount of time and an incredible tolerance for repetitive gameplay, grindy gameplay, then these might be the games for you. And I guess you're getting a lot of them at 6 quote-unquote remasters. They really are just ports, is a better way to say it. But yeah, there's, for the vast majority of people, you should probably not try to play these games. If anything, Square Enix would have remade these games, not remastered them, like they're doing with Final Fantasy VII. And there's just not enough story there, I think, for them to even do that. Yeah. In a lot of ways, if you're going to have old 8-bit games, putting them on cell phones makes more sense. I can see people with long commutes playing Final Fantasy over the course of a year if they're riding a bus or a train or something, but if you don't have that kind of commute time, then you almost certainly would not want to play those games. And there's probably even better things you could do on your phone than play Final Fantasy even in those situations. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Armored Core 6 won't just be a sci-fi Souls-like, according to Miyazaki. However, boss battles are the highlight of the game. So I heard, and again, I can't really quote the source here, so take this as just rumor, that the Armored Core team, Hidetaka Miyazaki, heading it up, they said they were going to make a new Elden Ring game, and apparently the publishers of that said, nope, we're not going to do that. So they kind of spoke out of turn. So FromSoft, from what I've heard, said, yes, we do want to make a new Elden Ring, and the publisher said, well, we own the rights to that, and we don't think we are going to do another Elden Ring, which seems like weird that you'd have such a successful game and not at least leave the door open and potentially even let somebody speak out of turn to say, yeah, say that we'd like to see that happen too. But this does feel very Japanese, that a Japanese publisher may take offense for somebody speaking out of turn and then just be cruelly reactionary to that and punish the company by saying, nope, we're not going to do that. Although that is not very Japanese in the sense that it is not letting the subordinate save face. But it's important to know that in Japanese society, There is always the subordinates, and then there's the higher ups. And the subordinate is always supposed to take the blame and let the higher up save face. And so it does not work the other way. The publisher was the higher up of Elden Ring, and so when the subordinate spoke out of turn, it is very Japanese for the higher up to say, "Nope, you're wrong. We're going to punish you for speaking out of turn. We're not going to let you save face or support that." And honestly, that's not too different from even Western ways of a business happens. If there was some indie company that, let's say Platinum Games, if Platinum Games said, "Yes, we're going to make a Bayonetta 4," and Nintendo is going to be funding it, and Nintendo hadn't agreed to that, Nintendo would totally, well, that's kind of a bad example because those are two Japanese companies again. I guess if Double Fine, which is owned by Microsoft, came out and said they were going to make Psychonauts 3, and Microsoft hadn't agreed to that, Microsoft would not support Double Fine on that. And that's a long story, basically to say this seems to be the reason why Armored Core 6 is being announced, is because they were told, arguably in no uncertain terms, that they weren't going to make an Elden Ring 2. And at a certain level, this is very possibly for the best, because it lets the Elden Ring team do something different instead of just making the same type of Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne type games over and over again in the same kind of fantasy setting over and over again. Armored Core with its mechs is going in a very sci-fi direction where everything else has been fantasy. Also, I suppose it's worth mentioning that George R.R. Martin had written a story for Elden Ring, and they probably don't want to get George R.R. Martin back involved for an Elden Ring 2. So that could be also a reason why Elden Ring 2 will just not happen, is because he would be too slow, or I honestly have no idea what the story of Elden Ring is. I'm not sure that most gamers even care what the story of Elden Ring is. I think they just like the gameplay mechanic, as it seems to be a very well loved gameplay mechanics. Moving on. Newer or lapsed PlayStation Plus members can now save $30 or £25 off subscriptions for a limited time. Current members of the service are ineligible for the offer. Which, okay, that's maybe a decent deal, but you have to also remember that PlayStation Plus is a very different service than Xbox Live, where you just don't get the day and date launches of new games through the Xbox Live service. You don't get something like that in PlayStation Plus. You get old games, and I would say PlayStation lineup and library of old games are arguably not any better than Xbox Live, and if anything, they're probably a little worse. It heavily depends, though. If you really just love all PlayStation first party titles, then maybe there's an argument there, but then a lot of PlayStation first party titles have been just ported to PC or even Xbox. Let's see, Amazon Prime is giving away 10 free games over Christmas, including Dishonored 2. Are these Steam games? Now, I guess technically they're not doing the quote free games because you still have to have Amazon Prime, so you're basically paying for it. December 27th is apparently where it starts. A lot of these games may have already been given away. Dishonored 2, Metal Slug, Metal Slug X, Metal Slug 3, Real Bout, Fatal Fury, King of Fighters, Last Blade 2, Twinkle Star Sprites in the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. Some more games listed here that seem to be from Hero Saga. Farm Hero Saga, and then Candy Crush Elements. Yeah, it doesn't really feel like the best lineup of free stuff. Prime Gaming's still really not going anywhere. And it's surprising that there hasn't been a better integration of what was Twitch Gaming and Twitch. They changed the name to Prime Gaming, and at that point they seemed to completely separate the idea of Twitch Gaming giving away free games, which I don't think Twitch really does give away any free games or anything. And as far as Amazon making video games, they've failed miserably on that with their Lumberyard project software. Like, I don't think there's going to be a single game that actually comes out and works on Lumberyard. So it really just kind of feels like Amazon is wasting their money on Prime Gaming for no good reason. At least on the Prime Video stuff, which I don't think they acquire enough things for Prime Video. I actually saw a YouTube video comparing what was added to their free commercial-based freemium service versus Prime Video, which is commercial free, and there's basically nothing good coming out month to month on Amazon Prime compared to what they're adding as far as old stuff with commercials on freemium. By far, getting a freemium account for free, or you don't even really have to log in, and watching that is way more economical than having Amazon Prime for that, for video. I wish Amazon Prime did more videos, but I really wish we'd just start to see some major consolidations. Ideally, if Amazon Prime gave up on Prime Gaming and then acquired either, I mean, this is probably too expensive for them, but if they acquired the Peacock network, CBS, which would be too expensive, or Discovery Plus, or Warner Brothers, even if they, like, more realistically, they could probably afford the CW and just buy the CW channel, that would be a better use of their talents. Or if they got rid of Prime Gaming and then they reacquired, like, G4. G4's name has now been ruined, but if they tried to do something like G4 and not call it G4, that might be interesting. Speaking of that, there's an interesting situation where Gerard the Completionist worked for G4 before G4 shut down and failed miserably, and he was on Game Grumps playing a randomized version of Super Metroid, and he played like episode 1 and episode 2, and these videos obviously were pre-recorded months and months in advance, like 6 months in advance, and episode 3 I haven't seen has come out, but almost certainly what is going to happen is Gerard is going to eventually have to come back on the Game Grumps and start talking about how he's no longer working for G4 because it shut down, because he was talking about how he was working for G4 in episode 2, and that just highlights how pre-recorded footage can be so delayed that major things could change. Yeah, generally I would like to see either Twitch or Amazon try to have a collection of video channels, video feeds, something that felt like G4, or that felt like it wasn't just a bunch of Twitch streamers, but something more curated, a little bit more curated. It doesn't have to be huge budget. But you do see that on Amazon.com itself, is that they have a bunch of streamers that they're, I think, sort of paying to talk about products and just basically do unboxing type videos directly on the Amazon.com site when they have Black Friday or Prime Day sales. Moving on, Xbox Series S is officially $50 or £50 off until Christmas. I guess I misread this. I thought it was $50 even, but no, it's $50 off. All Xbox digital machines see a significant discount amidst Microsoft's suggestion that some prices could increase next year. This is an odd comparison, certainly, because they did say that a lot of their games are going to be $70 starting next year. $70 for a digital version of a game is going to feel a lot worse than $70 for a disc version that you could sell back or give to your friends. I know a lot of people don't think about that until after the fact, but you really should not go digital if you're paying these high prices. If you want to go digital, get a Steam account and play on PC, because then you're going to get things for like 50 cents on a $20 game. The savings can't be denied during Steam sales. The savings are very much denied on disc-based games or console-based games. So why in the world, like $50 off implies that they are maybe balancing it out if you buy 5 games in the next year, which maybe you wouldn't buy 5 games in the next year with the Xbox Series S at full price. So $150 sounds like a good deal, certainly, but it really isn't that quite that much of a good deal. If you could just buy another $50 attachment to add a disk drive to it, it would be worth it. And inherently, yeah, I would prefer them to replace this version of the Xbox Series S with a Series S with disk drive built in, or just an accessory you can add after the fact, because there really is no reason why you can't do that. One of the things that USB 4 has is a support. It isn't required. USB 4 is still a nightmare, but it has support for like a Thunderbolt PCI Express connection directly through the wiring, which would be a much more lower level connection to the hardware. So you could potentially have an encrypted disk drive that would be very hard to emulate with like a trusted platform module type chip in it that plugged into another disk through USB-C, USB 4.0 with a Type-C connector. That way it would be very, very hard to steal or burn copies of games, compared to just putting a regular USB drive right now, which might be a little bit easier, but honestly it's still not that easy that most people would do it. But yeah, I could see them coming out and making the Xbox Series S a new version of it that is same RAM, same GPU, which would appease the developers, but still doesn't have a disk drive. I could see them also coming out with another model that does have a disk drive and then doesn't change anything else. If they did both, then you're just selling an Xbox Series X at that point, though, so there would be no reason to do both. But yeah, I don't think I can recommend anybody actually taking up this offer, unless you just don't have an Xbox at all. But do you even want to get into that Xbox ecosystem if you don't have an Xbox at all at this time? Yeah, that's questionable. You still probably could get for $100 instead of $150 if you're going cheap an Xbox One, or you could go get an Xbox 360 probably for about $60, and a bunch of old used games. Or you could just stick with getting a Switch and playing Nintendo exclusives, or you could get a PC and Steam sales. Let's see. So now we're at the Gamatsu articles. Crest has acquired Aqua Plus. I think we had already talked about this on Friday. It doesn't really mean too much to me. They make like the visual novels, I think, based on the Utawara Mono series, if I pronounce that right. Yeah, Uta wa Re Ru Mono series is what I guess they're best known for. Kimetsu has Forspoken gameplay showcase, battles with several characters and such. Inherently, I think Forspoken might be a very interesting game. We just kind of have to wait until it actually comes out. They're teasing it a lot, and I think they're probably not showing the best foot forward. If they are showing the best foot forward, then they're not showing quite enough to interest me. The idea of a girl being pulled into a magical world and then doing very standard JRPG stuff is only going to be so interesting. The story, the actual voice acting and dialogue can drastically bring in more interest when you're actually playing the game, but seeing it in little snippets is not that interesting. Compare that to, say, something like Escaflowne as an anime, a very old anime, but a very popular one at the time because it was on TV. And you have a girl brought into another world, and then you have a big magical mech suit that somebody is fighting in. I don't think it actually is the girl that is fighting the guy. I think it's a love interest male that's fighting in the mech suit, and she's going to village after village for the first part of that whole story, and you see more characters and you see more new things that are interesting, because Escaflowne is an anime and you don't have to have that gameplay mechanic where you're just wandering an empty field and fighting random enemies. Escaflowne as an anime, by the way, is an interesting challenge because there is an Escaflowne movie that basically retells it in a different way and arguably not as good of a way. Or there is an Escaflowne TV series, which is way too long. And arguably you should probably watch the TV series first, and then if you're still enthusiastic around the series, watch the movie. We have the Infinity Nikki and the God of Beautiful Dreams trailer, Bloom Up music video. Infinity Nikki is a gacha, Nikke, or Love Nikke, I believe is the name of the mobile game, is a gacha game with far too many microtransactions, and that is my biggest fear, certainly, around them taking a mobile game that is a dress-up game for little girls that has way too much gacha microtransactions in it, and turning that into potentially a 3D dress-up game. Let's see. Interesting, we're starting here with seeing what looks like Nikke is a very little girl, but that's not the model of the character that you see in Infinity Nikke. This is a bit too slow of a trailer just to sit through all of this. Oh, it probably doesn't affect. Well, we that was a big jump there. Now she's in a fantastical bus full of balloons flying around. Yeah, I don't know how we got from point A to point B there. The game I played and recently played and uploaded, The Vagrant, apparently the audio, like almost every song in the game, is content ID claimed. I don't think it's going to stop people from actually being able to see my footage, but if I was ever monetized, that's just going to be one of those series of which there's too many of those, where almost certainly all the ad revenue is going either half to the musicians or all to the musicians. Of course, my first focus and goal here is to... This is nothing like what I saw of the game, and this is just still not that character that was in the game. I'm just jumping all around. Nikkei and the God of Beautiful Dreams. Is this just like a totally different game? No. See, like, this was the age of the character, and this trailer is basically just showing her as a little girl, which I bet that was for a 6-minute long video. That seems like that's some really polished story. See, here you see her right at the end. More than likely that is a case where they had an animation studio making it for her, making a trailer before the game is anywhere close to being finished. And see, if this is a music video, this also doesn't really show a great depiction of what Infinity Nikkei is, other than you're going to be playing as this pink-haired girl, and that you're going to transform your dresses as you're doing some platforming, adventuring in an open world. And honestly, it's gotten so easy to make these kinds of music videos and just have a model and copy that 3D model into a pre-rendered collection of poses and movements, that, like, as long as you can get just some musician somewhere to make some new music video around it, that these dance moves you see in low effort asset flip video games all the time, and frankly at concerts for VTuber type, not VTubers, Vocaloid type characters. Yeah, I think both of those trailers are probably a very good example of how not to advertise a video game, but to instead advertise a person and a personality. Because obviously the video game is not ready. They had already put out a trailer showing off the gameplay, and they are trying to turn this Nikkei character into some character that people really love. And inherently, this also kind of feels like they have too much money for their own good, because they are blowing it on music videos and little short animations instead of putting it into the video game. And the video game itself is going to be weird. Like, it is going to be very much targeted to little girls, which is great, but that may make it very hard to play for anybody else, or it may very well just receive criticism for the West for one reason or another, or just receive a deafening silence in which nobody covers it anywhere, which also is going to hurt it. So it's got a lot of problems, certainly. And the last Japanese kind of girl-centric game I can think of, I think, was called like Blue Reflection as a series, and that's more high school girls going on adventures and with slight lesbian overtones. And it's pretty much we can make a very easy generalization to say Japanese people are somewhat perverts, and that they love to throw in the lesbian overtones, although some of that may just be true friendship happening and being taken as lesbian overtones, but some of it definitely is intended to. Samurai Maiden, kind of a great example of that, where that's not going to really be an adult game, and yet it has lesbian overtones for no good reason, and the game itself doesn't seem like it's going to be that good as far as Samurai Maiden. And I'm hoping Infinity Nikki is really good, and I'm hoping it doesn't have microtransactions. But if I was to bet, I would bet the opposite in both cases, that it would be full of microtransactions and very bad. Moving on, Tekken 7 sales topped 10 million. The Tekken series in total has topped 54 million. Here you can see a collection of characters, all in kind of like celebration outfits. And this really highlights to me that I know nothing about the Tekken series. I don't know any of these characters, although in all fairness, I imagine a lot of these characters are in fairly revealing outfits for this picture and just aren't in those outfits in the game. They may be in other kinds of revealing outfits, but I just don't know. Just not the same ones. There's a lot of characters that are pretty blurry, looking at the screen 10 feet away. I kind of think I recognize this guy, but that's pretty much it. I don't recognize a single guy. I couldn't tell you who this guy's name is, but yeah, maybe I recognize this purple-haired character. I definitely would be at a loss to get into the Tekken series, but I probably should try out the Tekken series at some point if I'm ever going to cover fighting games. Let's see. Moving on, Melty Blood Type Lumnia free DLC characters the Conta Monte Cristo and Ishiwaka Maru launches December 15th. That's two very different names there. I think Melty Blood is a fighting game, if I was to guess. That being said, it seems like they've added some language into the storyline stuff. Is this really a fighting game? Yes, it is. It's a fighting game with some story. Inherently, it might do me very well if I found a YouTuber who would go through all the story narratives of the fighting games and just catch me up on each specific characters and where their story goes. Like, the fighting parts just don't matter that much to me, particularly if I was trying to work my way towards actually trying to play Tekken 7. I really don't want to play Tekken 1 through 6 just to know what's going on in the story, if it even matters. So just little recaps in fighting games. Honestly, there should be built-in recaps in fighting games, and I just don't think there is much of that. And a lot of times these stories are parallel dimensions based on which character you're playing, so there is no canonical story. Moving on, this week's Japanese game releases: Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, Aki Katana Shin, and more. I guess this is Aki Katana Shin. Let's see, there's a new hardware. You don't see that very much with a Nintendo Switch Sports set. And then Aki Katana Shin for the PS4 and Switch, launching digitally worldwide. Cosmic Frontier Collection for the Switch. Crisis Core for the PS5, PS4, and Switch. Then this game for the Switch only, which I don't know what that is. And this game, a RPG selection from Kimco, Volume 10 for the PS4. SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, rehydrated for the Switch, is just making it to Japan. Another long Japanese name for the Switch. And then World Rally Championship Generations for the Switch, launching worldwide. So that does seem to highlight that the Switch is still a major player, but we are seeing nothing for the Xbox at all, and a few things for the PlayStation 4 and one thing for the PlayStation 5 specifically. Now, in looking at these lists when they come out each week, I tend to completely ignore the digital onlys, which arguably does not paint a fair image, because you can see there's 2 games, 3 games here, 4 games here that are on Steam coming out digitally only, because Steam itself will only be digital only. And eventually, we're not very close to this happening, but eventually we may get to a point where PC gaming does become big enough of a thing that we start to have a real reason to go on the digital only releases too. Although usually the digital only releases are super long. We can see there is not much that came out this week. I imagine even Japan is kind of slowing down for Christmas, even though they really don't slow down that much for Christmas. They slow down, I think, a little bit just in solidarity of the West and in general for end of year, financial year reasons. Let's see. Samurai Maiden shipments and digital sales top 50,000, and for a niche game, that's probably a pretty high number, considering it was released on December 1st, and this is the game that I kind of feel is inspired by Oni Chambara, and that you're sword fighting, hacking, and slashing zombies with the weird lesbian harem of girls that you have fighting at your side. It is also kind of a weird middle of the road game, though, in which it really isn't in for mature in what it seems like it's going to show. If anything, Samurai Maiden coming out right now at December 1st, compared to Killer 7 coming out way back, I think, in the GameCube era of maybe 2005, maybe a lot longer ago. No, probably a lot longer than that. The fact that you see a lot more weirdness and a lot less pressure to censor yourself or be in that mushy middle of not being too extreme. It shows how aggressive the censorship and the pressure to censor yourself has been on Japanese game developers. Because I can almost swear that in the era of Killer 7, if he was given the job of making Samurai Maiden, he would have shown the Samurai Maiden characters like totally making out, totally having sex, and he would have shown a lot more blood and a lot more gore, and it probably would have been a more interesting game because of it. Let's see, we kind of already talked about this. The ESRB has rated Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster Series for PS4 and Switch. Okay. Yep, nothing new to say there. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis closed beta test delayed to the summer of 2023 and released a winter 2022 trailer. The Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII characters are not the Final Fantasy VII characters I think most people think of. Apparently this is also a smartphone game, which, if this is a smartphone game, it looks pretty nice for a smartphone game. But with the reboot, remake, or continuation of Final Fantasy VII that came out, the Crisis Core characters seemingly are trying to be better connected to the events of the story, so as to you have that need to play it more. Which just reminds me, like, they did announce that whole new Kingdom Hearts game as a teaser trailer, and they've said absolutely nothing new about that since they announced that, which was probably 4 or 5 months ago. They probably won't say anything new about it for years. Which that is kind of just a great example of announcing something way too early, so people are going to forget about it. Maybe there is some search engine optimization idea where you should just put out your first announcement and your first trailer for a game super early, to I don't know, lock up the internet, so that's the thing that comes up when people search. But I don't think that's the best way to announce a game. If you were going to announce a new Kingdom Hearts game, you would have wanted to announce it in releasing within a year, and you would have wanted to have a steady stream of interviews and announcements and things to say about it every couple of months at least. I believe the Kingdom Hearts game trailer came out around the time E3 would have happened, and it would be interesting to just look at this point at all the announcements that were made at E3, which was less than 6 months ago, and just see where we are at as far as all of those announcements, because I imagine the vast majority of games announced around the E3 time, even though E3 really didn't happen, still have not come out or been released. And I can't say it's just because we're in like a COVID slowdown at this point. Yes, 2022 has been bad, but they shouldn't have made these announcements if they weren't actually going to be available by Black Friday. Moving on, a game called Game Deck is coming to PS5 in early 2023, available both physically and digitally. I have no idea what this is, though. Some kind of RPG game? Is it on Steam? Yeah. Instead of looking at it on Komatsu's article, I'll just click it here. Well, this is a game that's on my wish list as some kind of cyberpunk RPG type game. In the last 30 days, it's at 58%. Overall, it's at 81%. I wonder if there's a specific reason why in the last 30 days it's not happy. Let's see, posted just today. For me, this game has become a main disappointment of the year. It had a lot of advantages: a peculiar concept, a pleasant visual style, the unusual setting, but the narrative of the game is a mess. It's a perfect example of how you shouldn't make detective stories. All of the ingenious plot twists are not surprising. They are annoying because they completely devalue everything that happened in the game. And no, I'm not talking about the fact that the player's choices have little effect on the ending. That wouldn't be so bad. No, literally everything you do in the game, right up to the very ending, is meaningless. Alright. Looked promising, but too much not so interesting text. It's got some game-breaking bugs. Like Planescape Tournament with all the text, but boring. Well, interestingly, that I think is going to convince me to reevaluate this game and put it back on the fall list and remove it off the wish list, which is not something I normally do. You do tend to see, though, when a game tries to port itself to something else, that they've given up on any more sales on the other storefronts. So, yeah. It's been on the Switch eShop already. Now it's going to PlayStation 5. I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually try to port it to the Xbox. Let's see. We already talked about this. Mario Strikers Battle League 3rd free update launches December 13th. Adds Bowser Jr., Birdo, Shellfish, Gear, and Urban Rooftop Stadiums. One of the problems, certainly, with like a game like Mario Strikers is that you probably want your kids playing soccer for real instead of playing soccer in a video game, first and foremost. And since Nintendo games tend to be kids games, it does make a decent amount of sense to not buy them video games based on actual sports they could be playing. This is interesting. This looks completely different as a page. Forspoken interview with Takeshi Aramaki and several other people. This is like an actual interview from Gematsu, which you almost never see. Unfortunately, they're talking about Forspoken, which I've already lost interest in. I guess this game is coming out January 24th, so the redemption in its release could happen. Certainly. Apparently the demo is now available for the PlayStation 5. I guess that's worth mentioning, and I'll just say check out this Gematsu article if you're interested. You know what? I did see a plugin as I was looking at other plugins for for OBS, Open Broadcast Software, that would make a QR code. I wonder if there's something I could do that could grab the URL of the specific tab I'm on and just put a QR code in the side. That way, if people really wanted to open these articles, you don't have to go and Google search them. It would just be right there. That's an interesting idea. Ideally, that would probably just be a Firefox extension, and I wouldn't be surprised if such a thing doesn't exist, because half of the things I want to exist tend not to exist because they're too technical and too uniquely useful to my ideas and my ideas alone. But I should spend maybe a few minutes thinking about if I could do that. If I can find a Firefox extension that just would put a QR code on the screen always in a specific place, that would be great. I almost always have empty space on the sides of articles, and eventually I do want to put some stuff there just to change the visuals a little bit, but yeah, that's a long-term project. Particularly, I would like to see a reference of just like different color palettes and different art animation styles when we're talking about video games on Steam to compare it to. But yeah, when we're actually talking about articles here, any kind of side art might be slightly interesting. A game called Hitori no Shita The Outcast has been announced for iOS and Android, according to Gematsu. This, I assume, well, I would have thought it was going to be just a visual novel, but it is more of a flat, colorful art style, kind of anime art style fighting game from the looks of it. Which, yeah, I definitely do think we're going to eventually start to see a lot of grindy type turn-based or even action-based RPG games, JRPG games, Chinese RPGs, Korean RPGs. I imagine we're going to start to see a lot of them move over to the cell phone so that they don't have to do as high resolution animation, and they just don't have to go through as much effort to be released and polished. This actually looks fairly interesting, although that virtual dot in the lower left where your thumb is annoying, and it represents what your actual experience would be as you would be playing the game. It is a bit of a catch-22, but eventually I do suspect we will. Kind of feels like it's a horror game. I do suspect we'll eventually get to the point where there are straight up Bluetooth controllers that everybody has as part of a case on their phone, or even USB controllers as part of a case on their phone for gamers, and then the on-screen inputs will go away, much like how the Nintendo DS fairly never really embraced the idea of the touchscreen on the second screen being input, and almost every DS game mostly was still using the D-pad and the A, B, X, Y buttons. So you're definitely in a very different mode now, as you're still using your left thumb to move and target, but you now have this whole weapon wheel in which you select actions, and I think your main button here is this. Yeah, and nobody's really going to like that touchscreen with no tactical feedback inputs. Alright, well, I don't want to waste too much time on this game, but it does look particularly interesting, and any announcement for any smartphone game that actually looks interesting is progress, since so many of them are bad. Let's see, DC Justice League Cosmic Chaos announced for basically everything. I mean, we don't have to include Stadia since it's shut down, and like Amazon Luna or Lua system, whatever it's called, isn't worth mentioning. So yeah, if you've got PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC, that's basically everything, except for mobile phone games. With the whole DC Warner Brothers merger, it's a little surprising for them to announce a new game this quick, and it's coming out fairly quick too, so this must be a project that was secretly in the works and they just hadn't made any announcement for, and we are going to have to just cross our fingers that they aren't rushing to put it out and just write it off as a loss, which they are doing for so much of the rest of the Warner Brothers DC lineups of properties, TV shows, movies, video games. Inherently, I think it was announced that everything in the DC universe, the new guy in charge of DC wants to be in one world, one connected universe, to have a DC cinematic universe in video games, in comics, in movies, all connected, which would be going one step further than the Marvel cinematic universe, which is still not really including video games or comics in that same universe. So this might be a game that's being rushed out because it can't be in the same cinematic universe of DC, or who knows. It doesn't look terrible for a kid's game. Like, it probably isn't that much of a game, though, if I was just to randomly guess. There is a weirdness here, I would say, in that I don't know if that cartoon around the DC superheroines is still going on, where it was the little girls as superheroes. So you had like little girl Wonder Woman, little girl Harley Quinn, and they were all hanging out, and it was all kind of about friendship and all of that. I don't know if that cartoon is still going on. I don't know where we are with Teen Titans as far as is a Teen Titans or Teen Titans Go still in the works or being aired. I don't know if the DC universe really even needs kid-friendly versions of their shows, because DC is inherently bad at doing kid-friendly stories anyway. So you do something like Batman the Animated Series, which is a more tweenager, mature type story, relatively mature type story, instead of doing super kid-friendly things. I kind of think at this point, even Superman and Wonder Woman are dead in the water as trying to be something that would sell toys to really young kids. Dead in the water in the sense that there will always be people who will want Halloween costumes for Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman, but I don't know if you really have to make a cartoon or anything to continue to get the same amount of sales based on that. DC, up until this point, has always been far, far too mature in every way. Too dark, too mature in everything it does. And they would lean heavier in their Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers catalog, and their Scooby-Doo catalog to appeal to kids as far as DC published comics. Although even now they are trying to mature up some of the Scooby-Doo shows, so I think they're probably just been bad at trying to sell to kids, and kids may just not want to buy comic books or DC properties or Looney Tune properties or Scooby-Doo properties that much anyways. Yeah. Let's see. Moving on, Binary Haze Interactive and AdGlobe announced a strategy RPG called Redemption Reapers for the PS4, Switch, and PC. It's due out in February. It does weirdly seem, unless these games get delayed, that this may be the first time in years that we actually have not really that much of a drought in the January-February times. Some of this may heavily boil down to a recession and just people not having money. Although, if you didn't have money in December, you probably don't have money in February. Or you probably don't have money in January. Well, this looks interesting enough. It does just seem to be kind of a turn-based strategy placement game with a lot of animations around it. And generally, I never want to play turn-based strategy placement games, regardless of how fancy they look. It kind of feels like what you would do with Diablo if you weren't going to do action in Diablo, which inherently I wouldn't want to play a Diablo-like game that wasn't action-based. Let's see. Our last Gematsu article today says an arcade naval combat simulation game called Waves of Steel launches February 6th for PC and then later for the Xbox Series. It does seem like there is an argument to potentially running a counter as far as these announcements, as far as which consoles are being announced, because it definitely seems like there was more PlayStation 4 announcements than Xbox Series announcements today. Alright, so now I'm going to quickly try to burn through all the games that came out on Steam. Today being Monday means we are going over the weekend, which means we very much are going to run into an adult game like Hentai Tentacle Survivors, which, ooh, this game looks awful. Just absolutely awful. It has a weird kind of 8-bit animation style for its actual gameplay and one screenshot in the background, but then the vast majority of the game looks like it is pre-made art or stolen art just on the side of the game. It is $2.69, which is really expensive, English only, and I will leave it at that. Noticeably, I will give it some praise that it seems like it's a bullet hell top-down twin-stick shooter instead of a slide puzzle game, but it's about the only praise I can say is that they tried something different. This looks just like an asset flip game. Prehistoric Warcraft. Yeah, this visually doesn't look this polished. I don't know how I'd really describe this cartoon style too. I mean, technically it probably would fall under the idea of a 2D colorful art style just because of the pink and blue and white shirt, which is not the right way to describe this, and that's why colorful as a description is a bad descriptor. Anyways, it really should be more of a 2D natural art style because they all have black hair and pretty natural skin tone colors on it. But then you look at that character and then that goes back into more of the anime color art style, and it seems like you're playing as dragons. There needs to be a third descriptor to say this looks very hand-drawn, childish, cartoony. Yeah, and frankly, cartoon / anime might be the third descriptor to just say CGI or 3D, probably 3D. But even at that, maybe that's the wrong thing. Maybe it should be 2D cartoon versus 2D anime versus 2D CGI. Because you could make a CGI game that was 2D. It's not likely to happen. Moving on, I'm kind of rambling here. Still trying to get my head around good ways to describe things. And by the time I do wrap my head around good ways to describe games, they probably will change the art styles. Next, we have another adult game called Sex Adventures Hot Sauna, which is a 3D CGI type game with like a lot of sex and nudity in the sauna. So, delivers on what it promises for $2.06. It's English only. A lot of these games are just straight up visual novels and very possibly don't have any interactivity to them at all, and technically wouldn't fall under what I would describe as a game in the first place. Let's see. Next we have a game called Exalted Seraction. I could say yes and put a short on this, but I think enough of these screenshots have dark screenshot syndrome and they look kind of bad that it doesn't feel like this is a polished enough game to deserve a follow. It's almost there, but particularly that last screenshot here, I think really shows how a lot of the game may look, and a lot of these other screenshots are very much being handpicked to trick. We have a game called Listen Me, which looks like garbage. We have a VR clay shooting game, which I think I do want a VR clay shooting game, so I'll put it on the fall list. And kind of at this point, almost anything that makes it to the fall list probably should get a YouTube short. Polda, is this in English? No, it's not. It's Czech only. Looks like it's a point and click adventure game. There might be something interesting there, but even at that, there's a decent chance it's not much of anything. But it doesn't support English, and I am curating all the content I cover at least to be in the English language. Apologies. Here we have Face World Pro, which looks like this is more than likely a software to make you into a VTuber instead of anything that actually would be a game. Doesn't really seem like there's that many 3D models. Inherently, if you're going to do this, there's probably a more industry standard software that you would use, not this. And you would still need a 3D modeler to create your 3D model. I have given it some small thought, certainly, to trying to turn myself into like a VTuber, which would be cheesy more than likely. And I just don't think it would really benefit anything. In the same way, I don't think Facecam really benefits my footage in any way. Yeah, nothing there. But yeah, I will still consider it. I'll give this one a chance, even though it's already mixed, reviewed. I suppose saying the word mixed doesn't have any kind of like racist connotation as it once would have. There was definitely a point where if you said something was mixed, you were implying that it was not pure blooded. But in this connotation, saying something is mixed as far as this review makes enough sense. Yeah, we are doing our standard, going through a lot of garbage. This is an interesting potential gimmick with, see, this would be like a flat cardboard cutout animation style that you'd say like Paper Mario or something. A whole different descriptor that doesn't get used very much, or animation style that doesn't get used that much. Yeah, I honestly would probably just use my own logo if I was going to try and be a VTuber, and just have the logo itself just bouncing back and forth, and it probably wouldn't be worth it. Head basketball. Yeah, I'll give it a chance. This is obviously a simulation game of no interest. I do think eventually we probably will have fantasy football players that move towards video game styles of fantasy football playing. But there is a big jump you have to make between playing fantasy football and then watching actual football games played by actual football players, and then playing fantasy football based on random AI characters playing football in a video game. I'm going to make a YouTube short on some of these solitaire games going forward, because I am kind of cruelly ignoring them for not a good reason. Cannon jump, I guess, is probably a rocket jump idea, or a joke game. Give it a short though. This is just a tower defense game. And we're at December 12th now, so the odds of seeing an adult game seem to drop down fairly low once you get past Saturday and Sunday release times. There definitely is some kind of bundling happening towards between Wednesday and I would say about Saturday, the later parts of the weekend, which adult games get released. Although that being said, the bundling does not seem to be particularly specific or particularly strict. Yeah, I think we can say no to Fiend Heart. Might be something here. Should I give this a follow or just a short? I guess we'll do both. Is this an adult game? $59.99. Boy, do we not see games at that price. Particularly when this is just a spot the difference game. Say 5 spots. Way too expensive. People just straight up making jokes. And naming your game the same as the developer, the same as the publisher. I feel like that is an indicator that whoever is publishing this is probably not capable of really understanding English, and that they should be flagged as a game. Although, in all fairness, Valve doesn't seem like they really care one bit what kind of garbage games get listed at random prices. But there should be somebody in charge. Like, they really should just hire me, frankly, or somebody like me that would just go, you know what, it's very easy to say, if this equals this, flag it with a 3-star. If this equals this or this, flag it with a 2-star priority, and just the most number of stars possible. If the price is $59.99, give it a flag it with 1 extra star at that point, because that's really expensive for something potentially in the Steam Direct. It wouldn't be incredibly crazy to merge all of these tags that are put there almost certainly by the developer themselves, and say what is the average price for games that have these matching tags, and say this is way out of line with that price, so let's also look at it. Like, I know there's probably some legal reasons why they couldn't come out and say we don't want you to sell the price at this price, but they probably should have better lawyers writing better contracts to get around those legal reasons. And frankly, there should just be a Steam Direct contract that says we reserve the right to change your listing in any way we choose, including price and whether it is listed for sale on Steam or not. Particularly for Steam Direct. Now, other publishers like EA and Ubisoft are not bound by the Steam Direct contract, I'm sure. Always looking for an Egyptian game that's good, and I'm never finding one. I'll give that a follow. Although that doesn't look particularly. Wrap with a Kiss. Visual novel. Yeah, and I really don't have a great way of describing this either, as far as an animation style. 2D, colorful, I guess, kind of makes sense. But I would still probably label this as probably a Russian game, or at least a Western game. Because this definitely isn't in that moe or kawaii anime styles. Otherwise, though, as a visual novel, I'm not interested, so. Oh yeah, I guess I didn't say in the accountability section that I am still watching. Interesting that this is mixed. I'm going to give this a short, but not bother to put it on the follow list. This looks like one of those Five Nights at Freddy's clones. I'm still watching the season 6 of Big Mouth. Yeah, and it's really taken a long time. This is one that should already be on the follow list, but I guess I didn't do it. This one's going to be a big one if people actually play it, because there's a chance that this game is actually good, or at least it's going to take an interesting concept of having a big empty field and turning it instead into a big ocean that you can slide and dance on and move faster through. There was this comedy show called The League that I really liked, and one of the comedians on there got in trouble for claiming he was at the Twin Towers during 9/11, I believe, and he wasn't in his act, and that ended most of that show. Just basically wrapped up and ended. It also went long enough that it wrapped up and ended, and it's ridiculous that it's taken me this long, but basically Big Mouth is just The League with the fantasy football element taken out. And it's basically an example of if I had just figured out that Curb Your Enthusiasm is just Seinfeld, with Seinfeld not the Seinfeld characters not in it. Half of the voice actors in Big Mouth are friends of the creator that were also on The League, and Nick Kroll in particular was in The League. I guess I still would recommend people watch The League. One of the problems though with The League is a lot of the dirty jokes, being a live action cartoon show, somewhat fell poorly, fell flat, where the Big Mouth animated show, dirty jokes, I think play a little bit better. Anyways, I'm supposed to be burning through all of this. Yeah, these streams really are my chance to ramble, and I don't know what I would do if I started to get significant feedback, or more feedback than just people not watching of the rambling. Like, if people said, hey, just talk about Yu-Gi-Oh, just play Yu-Gi-Oh, or just talk about the video game news and don't share your opinions. I probably couldn't really respond to that very well, because honestly, if you just wanted video game news, just check out like the latest feed news posts of Video Games Chronicles, Gamatsu, and GameDeveloper.com, and you'd get the same news without my opinions. And if you just want to see somebody playing Yu-Gi-Oh, there's plenty of people out there that will just play Yu-Gi-Oh and stay silent and play copyrighted music in the background. I have no idea what this is, but this does look intriguing. As some kind of like strategy card game based on fighting with basketballs. I guess in a similar way, I would not know what to do if I got feedback, whether people wanted me to ramble 100% and stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh and stop talking about video game news. I could probably do that, but there would be a lot of silence, and there would be, without looking at the video game news, there would be nothing to prompt my mind to saying anything new. I would go through basically the accountability section of what I did at the beginning of each stream, and then that would just be it. Obviously, everybody needs some external stimulus to say something new. Otherwise, you're going to end up just repeating yourself, which I do a lot of that anyways. This is an interesting game. I don't think this is probably that good, but I kind of want to give it a chance. Being a lunar rover, driving a tank. There was an old game that was very similar to this that was either called Patrol or Lunar Rover or Outworld, maybe. It seems like this is a spiritual remake of that game in way better graphics than what it was originally, because it was originally just like a Commodore. Yeah, inspired by one of the first games I ever played on PC, and I guess they just don't name what the game is. Probably was called Patrol. Alright. And then we have one more game here. That is nothing. So now we're at the GameDeveloper.com article, so we'll probably have about 5 of those, and then we'll have the fall list cleanup, and then we'll be done for today. The Outbound Ghost developer alleges a fractured relationship with partner. Do you really need to say alleges when one of the involved party claims there's a fractured relationship? At a certain point, doesn't it take two to tango for a relationship? So if one person claims it, it is inherently true. Let's see. It says these two companies are going to war over the publishing rights. We've seen this happen multiple times where publishers and developers are fighting over publishing rights, or fighting over the publisher not paying the developers, or the not giving the rights over or handing the rights over when the game is done. It always comes down to being a really messy situation where it doesn't ever feel like there's a cut and dry good guy or bad guy, and it honestly seems like it is a reflection of the economy no longer being just this big bubble where there's angel investment money to be thrown around and wasted like crazy. Here you can even see in this article, disputes over games publishing rights are nothing new. But frankly, at the end of the stream, I don't even think I really want to bother to read this. Inherently, this is not actionable news. This is good to be informed news, but you can't do much other than just not buy the Outbound Ghost and not support the publisher and not support the developer If both of these companies, and if it was standard that both companies were then somehow actually blacklisted and boycotted, and so actual game players, gamers, if we just all boycotted every company that had any fight, developer and publisher equally, and punished both companies for having public fights, maybe these fights wouldn't be so public in the future. But that's unlikely to happen, and that's about the only action a gamer could do. Otherwise, you have to pick a side when you don't know who's really telling you the truth, and you really shouldn't pick sides in any situation if you can avoid it. So, yeah. It would be kind of intriguing, though, if all of a sudden companies learned that they cannot go public between these fights and they have to do it in the privacy, which they should be doing anyways. There should just be straight up arbitration agreements and just lawsuits done quietly. There's no reason to go public. That's one of the things that perhaps Twitter has done wrong, is that it has encouraged a lot of people to take the path of going public and just like slinging mud when it really should just be done in private. It doesn't benefit anybody to go public unless you think you can win in the court of public opinion, or you can't win in the courts of the law, which inherently, maybe that is another thing gamers and people in general should just assume, is that if somebody is going public instead of suing, then they probably are in the wrong and know that they can't prove what they're saying. Although there have been definitely times where people have gone public with a ton of receipts, but even in the Doom composer situation, it is odd that all these accusations came out and then there was no lawsuit so far that has been filed, because the beginnings of a lawsuit really should have been filed. And at this point, as far as the accusations made against both the creators of Doom and the producer of Doom and the soundtrack creator of Doom, one of those two sides should have filed a lawsuit at this point, and yet it doesn't seem like they did. Let's see. Obsidian's Grounded has grown to 15 million players. Grounded, I believe, is now out of early access after being in early access for, since mid-2020. So I think it is, now at version 1.0, and I think there actually is some story there. That being said, also, I think it is still a game where you need 4 players to play together, which makes it not an ideal game for me to ever check out. It really is one of those examples, too, where early access only hurts you as far as having an actual product that I personally would ever want to play. But eventually, if I were to get Grounded and play it 10 years from now, I would almost certainly completely forget about the 2 years of early access and only evaluate it on its current version, whether that is still 1.0 or further. Let's see. The European Commission argues that the FTC's Microsoft lawsuit is unjustified, which still don't really know how the European Commission has any say at all. Can they even release a friend of the court type letter as they aren't entities in the United States? Well, maybe they can. Maybe there's some kind of agreement between the European Union and the United States where they could submit things. Arguably, though, this may be making a mountain out of a molehill, in that they may be just quoting what the EU said in their investigation and making it seem like they've come out and argued against the direct FTC claims. Like, the only real quote here is the Commission cleared Microsoft's ZeniMax transaction unconditionally as it concluded that the transaction would not raise competitive concerns. Yeah. So it does really feel, looking at trying to skim the meat of this article, it doesn't feel like there is even a direct reaction. It feels like the European Commission did their investigation, released their findings, and then FTC decided to sue Microsoft, and now they're conglomerating that like the two are fighting each other, when I'm not sure that there is even a direct statement here. Yeah, feels like it's kind of a nothing story, which inherently that's all this is at this point. And we have gotten, at this point, I think, hundreds of articles around the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger and things just in general around Activision Blizzard, and it is all much ado about nothing. It's just like none of it matters until either the merger works or the merger fails. That's all we needed. An initial announcement that they were going to try and buy it, and then we needed total silence until it either goes through or fails. It is kind of interesting to see GameDeveloper.com, who is very much anti-Activision Blizzard in their anti-union ways, somewhat trying to support Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, which I guess is a lesser devil than Activision Blizzard staying as its own company, but still really a devil, because Microsoft has been very anti-union too. So it almost certainly you're going to have Microsoft doing some kind of union busting weirdness to when they acquire Activision Blizzard. And they already said they weren't getting rid of the CEO of Activision Blizzard immediately, which is weird to confirm that or say that. But so I don't know why they think. I think it's probably a misnomer that a lot of people believe, to think that Activision Blizzard will just immediately become this better company if they get acquired. It might slowly become a better company, but it might very well just stay exactly the same. Let's see. We already talked about Tekken 7 surpassing 10 million lifetime sales. The mobile publisher Playteka is laying off 15% of its total workforce, which, depending if you have 100 people, that would be 15 people. If you have 1,000 people, that's 150. If you have 10 people, that is 1.5 person. So, yeah, it could be like 30 people in the workforce until you get to the subtitles here that says over 600 employees will be reportedly affected by the job cuts. So that tells me that they had slightly over 9,000 employees if 600 are being laid off, unless I'm doing my math wrong, which is very possible. Supercell has pulled loot boxes from Brawl Stars in favor of deterministic rewards. The new reward track called Star Road will now be used to unlock brawlers. Brawl Stars. I don't know if I know what Brawl Stars is, though. I guess it's some kind of mobile phone, maybe Smash Brothers type game from Supercell. I am still playing the Marvel Snap game, but yeah, every day that I play it more, the more I feel like I am rounding off to a very late game concept in it, and at some point just going to have every card in the game, and I'll just be doing the dailies for no reason, and I'll just be playing the dumb game for no reason. The actual gameplay of it is not getting better, it's getting worse as far as Marvel Snap is concerned. I think the numbers will probably eventually show that too, as fewer and fewer people come back multiple times throughout the day, which they want you to do every couple hours to play a couple more games. Apparently the IGF has accepted over 500 entries for the Game Developer Conference 2023. GameDeveloper.com, parent company, owns IGF and GDC. Obviously there's going to be games like Monkey Island, and then 4 other games. I couldn't tell you where they were from. And I'm not 100% sure what even GDC is. I don't really think it's an award show as much as it is just a convention of game developers all going together and talking about different aspects and different ways in which they think they did a great job in making a game, or different struggles they ran into in making a game. It is a lot of, for lack of a better term, insider baseball, and frankly a lot of circle jerking too, of game developers telling other game developers, this is the way to think, this is the way to play. It is almost certainly a major nexus point, if not the major nexus point, where ideas of adding accessibility to every game and adding just more and more crazy versions of accessibility to every video game, such as adding sign language to a game that already has subtitles, comes from. It is almost certainly a major nexus where the ideas of toxicity in video games gets propagated and talked about. It highlights definitely where game developers talk amongst their own groups of peers and within themselves and create their own reality, more than perhaps doing surveys and talking to regular gamers, or just experiencing games through the eyes of a regular gamer. I will leave it at that, but GDC also kind of deserves to exist. Otherwise, it would all be done in back rooms and nobody would see it in public. Mostly GDC is also just completely unimportant to most gamers and not worth people attending, and they don't have like live streams. Honestly, if they did have live streams of all of their presentations, that might be more informative to struggling or aspiring new kids and programmers who want to be game developers, to learn new things, learn tricks, as far as how to program, how to run a business, how to be a game manager. Moving on, John Romero shows development process of a Doom 2 mod in a live stream. This is a interesting image that I don't think quite fits the Doom 2 presentation, but I guess maybe the mod is changing the image here. Now, this is important to point out, that he's talking about Doom 2 based on the original Doom that came out in 1993, and the mod I guess is called Sigil 2, which I assume is there is a Sigil 1. He is not talking about the reboot of Doom 2, which honestly there is just there's just not a good way to make mods for the reboots of Doom and Doom 2. The first Sigil was built for the original Doom. Sigil 2 is being made to run on top 1994's Doom 2. Honestly, though, in comparison to the last article, you might learn a lot more by just watching somebody like John Romero show the development process on a Twitch stream in a longer process than you would learn at a overly polished speech being given at GDC. Unfortunately, in this example, John Romero is also making a mod for Doom 2 that came out in 1994, so there's really no relevancy there. If you were to try to make a Doom 2 mod and submit it in a programming class, maybe the teacher would be nostalgic and give you a decent B plus for that, but you're not getting an A plus for making a Doom mod, not unless you do something amazing and just completely rewrite the code. And even if you completely rewrote the code, it's just not relevant programming knowledge. Like, almost certainly Doom 2 was programmed in C, maybe C++, possibly programmed in assembler language or something else. It's just not going to be in something like C#, or even possibly now maybe games should be programmed in something like Rust. Or if you were like a new programmer, you'd be programming something in Python. But you're not just going to be in C. You might be in C++. But generally you'd be using something like the Unreal Engine for a Doom 2 mod. And in that you'd be doing C++ or C# programming. And that would be what they would expect, and that would be what they would want. Hopefully, if it's a good programming class. A lot of classes probably are still teaching older software, but not old at 1994 old software. Moving on. Let's see, we have some fall list cleanup to do. Well, this game is rated very positively. It's a political dating sim / visual novel. So we'll put that on the wish list. That's Ambition, a Minute in Power. Oh yeah, this is the one where I guess if you lose, you get your head chopped off during the French Revolution. Let's see. We have a game called Amazing Fix, which is apparently a decluttering game. I'm not ready to say yes to this just because this isn't really my style of game. And it's early access. So I'll leave this on the fall list and give it some more time. I didn't check if that other game was early access. Amazing Chicken Adventure needs more time. Alzheimer's Memories. Probably I would say no to this, but I'll give it more time. I just don't want to make any decisions today, do I? Always the Same Nightmare. I think we can say no to this. It's been out for a year. It's just not relevant enough. Avalone. It's rated very positively, so we can put that on the wish list. Luna Sentinel Shards. I think I might be willing to make an executive decision. But you know what? I'll just give this more time too. Just leave it. It is positively rated, but it's just not relevant at 23 reviews. But honestly, if it came out in May 26, 2021, it's probably not going to get any more reviews. Inherently, playing Diablo 4 instead of playing a Diablo 4 clone would probably push me to saying don't bother to play this game. And honestly, I could just find one good Diablo 4 clone on Steam. A lot of those games, I guess, are kind of in a holding pattern. This is an escape room adventure. I think we can put that on the wish list since it's mostly positive. Yeah, because if the Activision Blizzard acquisition goes through and then all of a sudden Battle.net goes away and we start to see Diablo 1, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, Diablo 4 all on Steam and every other Activision Blizzard game on Steam, well, that really eliminates needing to find clones of worse versions of the same game. We already have like Torchlight, or yeah, Torchlight 1 I think is fairly playable if you want to play Diablo-like game on Steam. This one I guess we can remove from the fall list just because it's been in early access too long and it just doesn't look that good. And this one is mixed, so we can get rid of that. Alpha Shark, I think we can get rid of this just because it's visually ugly. Oh yeah, and then there was a tweet here I wanted to point out from Devolver Digital. Let me see if I can find it again. Here it is. From December 11th. It's been 10 years since Crow Team released the philosophical masterpiece, The Talos Principle. Wonder if they will ever do another one, ? Enlighten yourself for under $5 at Steam. So it's on sale, but they are playing with that tease, potentially, Devolver Digital is, not Crow Team, of a Talos Principle 2, which this may be a sneaky way to hint at a Talos Principle 2, which they really should have come out with a Talos Principle 2 a year after the first one, not 10 years after the first one. The reason they made the Talos Principle 1 was a way of Crow Team working on a new version of the engine of their software, their programming engine for Serious Sam's games, and just making things look really nice for a new generation of consoles and hardware, and just using a nice little side project to scale up to make Serious Sam's games. And they have released a Serious Sam game, and it didn't sell that well. So now Crow Team really is in this position where they probably would sell as well of a game making the Talos Principle, or at least I think that, maybe I'm totally wrong about that, than they would making another Serious Sam game. It would be kind of hard to get more philosophy into a Talos Principle 2, but whatever, they could probably hire writers to do that. They need to kind of go in a different direction with the story of the Talos Principle anyways. Just remaking the game with ray tracing would be an amazing improvement on their part, because ray tracing was not out when it came out 10 years ago. But yeah, they really should have either licensed the Talos Principle out or made other games like the Talos Principle but not called the Talos Principle to balance things out. But they seem like they are constantly locked into the idea that they have to make more Serious Sam games, which sell, but I don't think they sell that well. I think it's also, what was the other thing I was going to point out about this? I think I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get it back either. Oh yeah, I wanted to make a comparison there, that the Talos Principle is basically Dead or Alive beach volleyball for Crow Team, in the sense that the reason Dead or Alive beach volleyball existed ever was because it was the Dead or Alive fighting series developers trying to work on the visuals and the graphics and just the general hair physics and, yes, some boob jiggle physics and just muscle movement physics of those games. So by making a Dead or Alive beach volleyball game in between the mainline Dead or Alive fighting games, they were able to make experiments, polish the visuals quite a bit, and have a product to show off, instead of having a game, the Dead or Alive fighting series, just be delayed a lot longer and maybe wasting a lot of development time. Would have kind of made a lot of sense for the Talos Principle to try and do the same thing as the Witness and have maybe a crossover event where the Witness and the Talos Principle had crossover DLC. Although it would kind of break the idea of the Witness if you were wandering around as a robot. The gameplay mechanics are slightly different too. But yeah, I personally would be very hyped if they did announce a new Talos Principle game, and I would love to play it. But I could also just go back and play it again at this point and completely have forgotten everything about the puzzles and solutions of the Talos Principle. There is a big danger though, that as soon as I started to play the Talos Principle, I would start to remember all the solutions. Neo 2 has a patch that was just released to fix issues with keyboard and mouse operation. I'm scrolling down my Twitter feed as we wrap up the stream. Yeah. Still scrolling down. Very possibly that there isn't any new news to talk about. Apparently the PC specs for the PC version of Returnal includes a 32GB RAM recommendation, which, as someone who I think has 64GB of RAM, yeah, I do think we are going to very quickly start to see more and more softwares, games in particular, asking for more RAM. That is a lot of RAM, and it just screams a lack of optimization. But the way Returnal works also might specifically optimize 32 gigabytes of RAM very nicely. But yeah, that does seem like optimize is the wrong word. Utilize. Returnal might use all 32 gigabytes of RAM very nicely, but that does seem unoptimized and poorly optimized. I do recommend a lot of RAM, but mostly, almost all my RAM is used up by Firefox or Chrome, which Firefox is slightly better on using RAM than Chrome, but not by much. Here Gamatsu says that Witch on the Holy Night for PS4 and Switch shipments and digital sales have topped 110,000 copies. Let's see. Apparently, Starbreeze is musing new intellectual property buys after going all in on Payday, which Starbreeze has been all over the place as far as we're going to be all about Payday. We're not going to be about Payday anymore. We're going to be a publisher. We're going to they don't know what they're doing or what they want to do or what will succeed for them. Apparently, devs call attention to a flaw in Steam's developer's backlink system, which, what is the actual flaw there? Let's see. Publishers on the Steam can use the developer's name to link back to their own Steam page, a practice that means developers' back catalog may not get full recognition. I think I've seen this. Let's see. Clicking a developer's name on the Steam will lead to a publisher's Steam page. Yeah, that definitely is something I've run into. When this game is released on Steam, the publisher is responsible for releasing screenshots, writing the description, and providing the backend information. That means they can also link to a developer's Steam page if a developer has one, or a personal website. I've never seen it linked to a personal website. As Two Left Thumbs points out in his video, publisher linking to their own Steam page means that developers can lose out on customers exploring their past or future releases. It is becoming far too common to screw over the developers by making both links go to the publisher's page, says Two Left Thumbs. As a user, if I find a game I like, I'm much more likely to look up what else the developer has done, not the publisher. I've kind of done a similar thing also as far as linking in the tags on YouTube pages, where I've stopped listing the publisher as a hidden tag and only listed the developers, because the publishers do change fairly frequently. Yeah, I don't know if you really call this a flaw or working as intended situation. Legally, I think the publisher probably is fully within their rights to put any information on the websites as they want, but factually and just accuracy wise, Valve probably should put some more restrictions there and say when somebody clicks on a developer's name, it should go to a developer page. Valve will probably come back and say, well, those publisher pages and developer pages are still in beta. They've been in beta for years. But yeah, factually speaking, as a consumer, if I'm clicking on a developer's name, I am never, 0 times out of 100, satisfied when I am taken to a publisher's page. Even if there was just a middle page there that says, this developer doesn't have any other games on Steam, would you like to visit the publisher's page instead? That would be fine. And it used to be a case when you clicked on the developer's name before these pages were set up that way, that you would then just immediately go to a Steam search with developer, I think it's : and then the name of the developer. And that way of searching has been minimized also by this case. Inherently, also, this is just a point that once again points out how art really should not ever be mixed with capitalism, and unfortunately there's no way to get around it at the moment. If these game developers had universal basic income and could just create their games without involving a publisher, then these kinds of problems would not happen. Or if there was just tax money going to art grants and game developers were just receiving art grants to make their games, then you wouldn't need a publisher either. I think I am back to where I was on my Twitter feed, so I don't think there's anything new otherwise to say. There's obviously a lot still to do, as far as I need to just play off screen some. I may even need to do just like a solo playthrough to try and get some of the daily quests done. That would kind of suck because doing a solo playthrough right now, duel and solo mode, 18 days, I will almost certainly get another duel and solo mode if I did that, but that wouldn't be the worst way to address this issue either. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. Thanks to Charla Esmeralda on the chat for talking to me at the beginning of the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.